Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. Today on the podcast, I just want to remind you to join us for our Instagram Live every day at 4 p.m. and join us for a conversation about what we talk about on the podcast, as well as most importantly, sharing your experience of how you're experiencing this current crisis. We hold the space at 4 p.m. Pacific time every day on our Instagram Live so that you have a space to be a part of a community. And it's a really wonderful community that shows up every day. So we're there, all of us that show up are there to support each other. Today on the Daily Coffee Pro, we are talking about finding grit. And yesterday we spoke about equanimity, which is about being still and observing yourself and what you're experiencing and your anxiety, etc., etc. Grit is kind of the opposite of that in a sort of roundabout way. And all of these little tools that I'm talking to you about are important because they have a time and a place during all of this. So let's talk about what grit is. Let's talk about when it's appropriate, and then we'll talk about how you use it. So, what is grit? The world's leading expert on grit is Angela Lee Duckworth. She has done an extensive amount of research and continues to do an extensive amount of research and is spearheading what we understand about grit. Now, grit is, as Angela Lee Duckworth defines it, passion and perseverance for achieving a long-term goal. Another way of looking at it is putting in the work continuously, again and again and again, and showing up when a lot of the time you don't want to, in order to get things done. Now, we call people who have grit, we refer to them as gritty people. So gritty people are people like Janina that we had on the podcast the other day. Most of the people that come on this podcast are gritty people. And it means that they have a passion for something and they're prepared to put in the hard work that's required to achieve a goal, a long-term goal. So when I was talking yesterday about I'm an inherently lazy person, I really am. Like, if I had the choice to just sit and do nothing all day, I would. And that's just because that's my tendency. I like to just chill and do nothing. I can't remember the last time that I did that. I really cannot. And that's because I have cultivated or found grit. Grit is not something that we're born with. It's something that you practice and you learn how to do. And there's a lot of talk at the moment about this pressure that's being put on people to like come out of this having achieved something and learned something and blah, 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 blah. Like, not everybody has to come out of this having tapped into their entrepreneurial spirit. But grit isn't about necessarily the size of the goal that you achieve. Grit is about having a goal, a long-term goal, and having the passion and perseverance to achieve it. And so remove the judgment of what it is that you think that people are telling you to achieve, because this moment really does call for you to have grit and to cultivate grit. So in this moment, you don't have to emerge from this pandemic. I was going to say price crisis, but what I mean is this pandemic. You don't have to emerge from this pandemic having established an online business and tried to figure out how you're going to roast coffee and learn all the intricacies of the coffee supply chain. No. Perhaps your goal is to exit this pandemic having been kind to yourself for the whole time. For a lot of people, being kind to yourself is incredibly hard. And if you want some tips in how to start changing your habits, there's a really great information out there. I can't remember the name of the author, but just Google tiny habits, the effectiveness of tiny habits. And I was listening to a podcast with this author the other day, and the way he approaches it is he just sets tiny little habits or tiny little goals that he achieves. So instead of doing 50 push-ups every day, that's not the goal. The goal for him is 2 push-ups every day. And he brings it right down to the tiniest possible version of the goal that he can achieve, and that's his commitment. And he's put a lot of research into this. I believe he's a psychologist. And doing these kinds of things, having the passion and perseverance to do 2 push-ups every day, that is what grit is. So perhaps your version of grit is understand what the goal is. Let's say it's coming out of this having been kinder to myself. What are tiny habits that you can establish, that you can show up for every day, that will challenge you and you have to stick to? And you know that those challenges are going to contribute to your kindness or your feeling of kindness that you're showing yourself. An example of that may be, I'm going to brew myself a coffee every morning, and I'm going to stay off my phone for that morning and sit in contemplation just for the duration of the coffee. Perhaps another form of kindness is, and a very good friend of mine, Angelo, shout out to Angelo, this is what he's doing. He's showing himself kindness by only listening to the news twice a day. That's a way of taking care of yourself. I have set myself the goal of being more trusting of people by the end of this pandemic. And I got to tell you, that's my hard thing. And it is incredibly terrifying. But showing up for the Instagram Live every day and supporting other people and allowing people to support me, as challenging as it is a way that I have decided to show grit and cultivate grit in a part of my life that is incredibly challenging for me. But that is the hard thing that I'm choosing to show up for. And I don't want to at all. As I said, I'm an inherently lazy person. But I'm high functioning because I have learnt how to cultivate grit. That doesn't mean that it's comfortable to cultivate grit. And that's an important thing to understand. Showing up every day is a commitment that you start making to yourself to build trust with yourself. Knowing that if you let yourself off, like as an inherently lazy person, I can't let myself off the hook with this kind of stuff. It would be really great for me to say, well, so with these businesses that I'm building, it would be fine just to not do this thing that I know I have to do every day. I'll just stop doing it for a couple of days. We're in the middle of a crisis. It'll be fine. For somebody like me who is inherently lazy, I know where that leads. That leads to me not getting shit done in that part of my business ever again. Because if I can get away with it once, I'll get away with it again and again and again. And so grit is the exact opposite of that. Grit is being aware, first of all, of the reality of your tendency towards laziness and how nice it would be to not have to fucking do any of this stuff. But you also accept that if I don't show up, I'm letting me down. And so during this time, what I want to invite you to do is, while everybody, me included, is saying this is a time for entrepreneurs to like find their flow and jump in and do all this kind of stuff. Yes, I'm not saying that that's not right. What I am saying is whatever it is that you want to see yourself emerging as at the end of this, whatever the reset that you're going to experience is, pick a goal, pick anything, and contribute towards it every day. And the goal may simply be, and I say simply, but it may be anything but simple for some people. The goal may be, I want to get out of this alive without having thoughts of suicide. And that is colossal for most people who experience, especially if you experience anxiety and you're being put in a situation where all of the emotions of this are hitting you all at once. There is a podcast that I want, if you are one of these people, there's a podcast, again, referring to my, shout out to my friend Angelo. Angelo put me on to this podcast, and it is put out by someone who I'm an incredibly massive fan of, Brené Brown. You will have heard me speak about her before on the podcast. She's just released a podcast, and if you are looking for particular kinds of strategies for dealing with emotional and are particularly uncomfortable with vulnerability, which is we're all being exposed to the very challenging moments that are showing up right now. I certainly am. I am being confronted and challenged in many, many ways, and it sucks. But if you're looking for support in ways that you just want them in your ears, other than, I hope this podcast provides some of that, but Brené Brown is just brilliant. She's just brilliant for finding the words that are backed by data in the science that she does that talk about vulnerability and shame and courage and all of that kind of stuff. Also look into Angela Lee Duckworth's work. Particularly a good starting point is the TED Talk that kind of launched her into the fame that she's got right now. And there's a book that she has called Grit. It's just wonderful. A lot of the stuff that she talks about is so easily relatable. So I hope that's been helpful. I just want to tip my hat to all of our community in New York City. For those of you who are listening, I'm wearing a New York hat. I hope everybody's safe, but I'm particularly thinking about everybody who's in New York right now. This is a devastatingly challenging time for you guys right now as you are heading into the thick of what's going on in your city, a hugely dense city that is just being challenged so much right now. So stay safe, stay healthy. We will rebuild our industry after this is done. But right now is the time for us to just be there for each other. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Join us at 4 p.m. for an Instagram Live. Stay safe, stay healthy. Have an amazing rest of your day.